Hello, anybody who's listening back to this. It is the peer support group for COPD. My name is Faye and I'm from Doncaster, and we've also got my colleague Marianne on the line. And today we're just going to have a bit of a chat with Jake, who's from Primary Care Network and is a pharmacist. So Jake, over to you.
Yeah, so my name's Jake. I'm a practice pharmacist. So I'm a pharmacist by trade, but I work in a variety of GP surgeries, doing various odd jobs. So I've just come and I intended to come and help people talk about and answer people's questions on inhaler technique, if there's anything generally about COPD. I'm by no means an expert, but I know an amount. Have you guys got any questions? Any talking points? And I know a lot about COPD, but I don't want to just recite the Wikipedia article.
I think the first question is, Jake, with people with COPD, obviously, if they've received a letter, they are the most vulnerable. And have you had any questions from any patients or anything regarding shielding or medication whilst shielding or anything like that?
There's been, the most common questions about medication tend to be, there's been a lot of inhalers dropping in and out of stock recently, which I know is anyone who's had inhalers probably experienced it at some point. Because I think the problem with the dreaded COVID, it's sort of everyone who's got even mild asthma has probably tried to order their inhalers in just to be sure, and they're basically the demand's skyrocketed and the supply can only manage so much. So there's been a lot of shortages. There's been a lot of switching people to different inhalers to try and keep up the supply. Regarding shielding, I think everyone who's going to get one has had a letter by now. But I think that the key thing to stress is the letter mentions 12 weeks, but don't think on 12 weeks and 1 day it's suddenly fine to go outside and do everything as normal, because COVID hasn't gone away; it's still out there. It's still worth using a bit of common sense and just limiting your risk, limiting your exposure to other people as much as you can. Getting people to do your shopping for you if you can, or pick up your medicines, taking advantage of deliveries where possible. It's not gone away, so don't think everything's suddenly safe just because the 12-week window has expired.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And speaking of inhalers, for anybody who's out there who's maybe watching this back, obviously who hasn't got COPD but has got a new inhaler or anything respiratory, are there any tips that you'd give of the correct technique?
The biggest problem I see with inhalers is there's two different types of breathing. So there are a dozen different types of inhalers, but there are inhalers that squirt stuff at you. So generally you know them as the puffer or the inhaler. You squeeze it and something comes out. And then there's the dry powder inhalers, which are, as they say, there's a pocket of dry powder in the device. The method varies, but there's a dry powder in there and you have to do the sucking to get it out. The biggest mistake I see people making is regards to how strong you should be breathing. So as a general rule of thumb, I can't think of any exceptions, to be fair, is if your inhaler squirts, you should be breathing very gently and very gradually in. And generally make the squirt happen in the middle of the breath. So very gentle in breath. Whereas dry powder inhalers, it's a suck, it's a gasp, because you've got to put the energy in to get the powder out. And it's difficult because, for example, the blue reliever inhalers, the salbutamol, you're probably going to be using it when you're gasping for breath. So it is difficult, I appreciate, for patients to slow the breathing, because if you're out of breath and you're gasping, it's difficult to then start breathing gently. But that's the biggest problem I see, is people either breathing too quickly for the squirting ones or not breathing enough for the dry powder ones. But I mean, the problem is there's that many different inhalers. It's hard to give specific advice. I mean, I could talk for hours about how to use each specific inhaler, but if I could get everyone to understand one thing, it's how much you should be breathing. if anyone's watching this and isn't sure, I ask your pharmacist and they'll be able to explain it to you, depending on what you're on. That's that.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you for that. And in terms of people with COPD, have you had much interaction with patients during the pandemic?
Yes, obviously I since the pandemic has taken hold, it's been mostly over the phone. But I don't think, to be fair, I've not had that many people who have either had COVID or suspected had it, luckily. Thankfully, still fairly rare. But the few that I have spoke to have generally noticed needing inhalers more. Their breathing's generally worse. They can't exercise as much. It's compounded by the fact that they're having to shield, so they can't do the exercise. They can't keep active, so that it's a vicious circle. But as I say, it's generally people seem to be thus far seem to be taking notice of the shielding and seem to be behaving themselves for the better.
I was just wondering, obviously there are similar symptoms with COPD and coronavirus. If someone who has COPD is suffering a bit of a flare-up and they may be worried about whether it is coronavirus or if it is just a flare-up potentially caused by anxiety or something, what would your advice to them be?
It would depend. I'd first ask if they've got a history of flare-ups. So is it happening regularly? If it's happened in the past, does it feel like that? The bottom line is there's not really a way to tell. I think you probably need to give your GP a call and have a chat with him or her. But there's not really a way to tell. Exacerbations of COPD, you tend to get quite phlegmy. Whereas if it's just, say, a dry cough, you're not coughing anything up, that might be a sign it's COPD. But that's by no means a hard, a line in the sand, because there's no reason you can't have an exacerbation that gives you a dry cough. So it's I mean, there isn't a cure for coronavirus. So my advice, if someone came to me and said I've got the cough or whatever, I'd probably say, I mean, you can first check if they've got if they've got loss of taste and smell. That's obviously, you don't tend to get that with COPD. But really, my general advice would probably be to give it a couple of days, and if it doesn't get any better, have a word with the GP. Especially if you're having trouble breathing, if your exercise tolerance is largely limited. If you found yourself bedbound, if you can't get out of the chair, just have a word with the GP, and that they'll be able to advise you the best course of action, whether it's antibiotics for an exacerbation or if antibiotics don't work for COVID. So don't expect antibiotics necessarily, because they don't always work, especially they don't work for viral infections, so which tends to be a lot of respiratory exacerbations. But yeah, give it a couple of days and ring your GP if it can get any better. Would be my advice.
That's brilliant. I've also was wondering, I know that we've been in contact with a lot of community groups and the community hub who are delivering prescriptions and medication to those who are shielding. How is it working in the practices that you're working in?
Generally pretty good. I've done a few stints in community while the busy period's been on, and they've been referring patients who are sort of desperate for delivery to the hub for I think I know a lot of people are obviously relying on sons and daughters and grandkids and grandchildren, but generally I haven't heard any complaints about the service. Generally, the people I've talked to that have used it have found it very useful. The volunteers have generally been very helpful, very pleasant, and all positive around, really.
That's brilliant, yeah. And how about after the pandemic? Well, when I say after, we don't know when the end is. But for anybody who might be still a bit anxious to leave, even if after shielding we're talking, is there anything that that's been put into place for that? Would there still be more deliveries available, or are you not sure?
Not that I know of. I know most, if not all, community pharmacies have a delivery service. Now, the reason we're suffering at the moment is... Oh, hi, Dave. The reason community pharmacies tend to be suffering for delivery at the moment is there's just so much demand for it because everyone's trying to stay indoors.
Yeah.
I think when Corona is over, that demand will drop as people, more and more people tend to start going outside for themselves. So I think you'll probably find that delivery from a chemist is much easier. Whether or not they'll continue the volunteering system, I don't know. I don't have any information, but I suspect probably not. Fundamentally, these people are volunteers. So if there's still the appetite to volunteer, possibly. I mean, they've gone to the process of developing it and building the infrastructure. So there's no reason it couldn't be continued. But whether or not there'll be the need for it, and whether or not they can get the volunteers is another question. But I don't have any insider information, so I don't know if that's obviously. No one really knows how long Corona's going to last. So it's hard to say what's going to happen after, because that could be July, it could be 2021.
Yeah.
But I mean, as I say, the people wanting delivery of medicine, certainly. I anticipate, I think it starts to die down now already. But certainly in the next couple of months, getting deliveries from chemists will be a lot easier. But it's key. Deliveries from pharmacies are a loss leader. Pharmacies don't get any money from the government for delivery services. They offer it because their competitors offer it, and then it's a circular thing because they have to offer it because they're offering it. So all the the drivers' wages, the fuel costs, the maintenance of the vehicles, that's all. It's a loss leader. So the pharmacies eat into their profits to fund. So that's the reason they haven't necessarily got the capacity to meet everyone delivering, because it's designed, it's strictly speaking only designed for the housebound people, which in a normal day is not that many people, but now everyone's got to stay indoors, that number's a lot more.
Yeah.
But I mean, if any question, give your pharmacy a ring, but I would certainly say, if not now, in the next couple of months, pharmacies will start having the capacity to deliver again, so you shouldn't have any problems getting hold of it. I saw Dave pop back in there, but I don't know if he's gone again.
Well, thank you ever so much for that, Jake. It's been really useful. And I'm sure if anybody's watching this back, you can contact the Well Doncaster email and we'll pop questions over to Jake. So that's welldoncaster@doncaster.gov.uk. Thank you ever so much, everyone. We'll see you in a fortnight.